And I just wanted to give a little overview of Brian Luke Seaward and his background. His presentation today, The Art of Resiliency, Coping with Stress, Digital Toxicity, Insomnia, and this fast-paced 24-hour, 21st century lifestyle. Brian Luke Seaward is regarded as one of the foremost experts in the field of stress management and pioneer in the field of mind-body healing. He's authored more than 12 books, including the classic bestsellers, Stand Like Mountain, Flow Like Water, The Art of Calm, and Stressed is Dessert Spelled Backwards. Dr. Seaward began his career as the Associate Director of Cardiac Rehab at Gundersen Lutheran Hospital in 1980. Over the years, he has served on the faculty of the American University, the University of Colorado, and the University of Northern Colorado School of Public Health. Additionally, he has served as a sports psychologist for many Olympic swimmers, ice skaters, and the U.S. national biathlon team. His corporate clients include Hewlett-Packard, Procter & Gamble, Motorola, Quaker Oats, John Deere, BP Amoco, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Organic Valley Dairy, the U.S. Army, and many others. The wisdom of Brian Luke Seaward can be found quoted in PBS specials, college lectures, medical seminars, boardroom meetings, church sermons, keynote addresses, and the graduation speeches all over the world. He currently serves on the faculty of the University of Colorado Conservatorium for Public Health and is the Executive Director of the Paramount Wellness Institute in Boulder, Colorado. It's my pleasure to turn it over to Brian Luke Seaward and let him take it away.
Thank you, thank you. First I want to say thank you for a great city. I hope you know how great Boulder is, and if you don't, let me just tell you, because I live in Longmont, and hold on, wait, that was not a joke. But when I travel around the world, as you heard, I don't say Longmont because no one's ever heard of Longmont, so I just say I'm from Boulder. And under my breath I say county. But when people hear the word Boulder from my lips, they're like, ah. It's like nirvana just enters their mind. And that word is relaxation to the rest of the world. Hope you know this. So the topic of the day is resiliency. Actually, I packed a lot in, and very likely we're not going to cover everything I want to cover. So we're going to try and go at warp speed, but slow it down some. But this topic of resiliency is one which is the new buzzword in stress management these days. You probably have heard of it. You're going to hear a lot more of it because this is the user-friendly word for now for stress management. As Dana said, I wrote a book called The Road to Wellness. Well, COA is one of the premier corporate wellness programs for information across the country. They asked me to do this book, and then when this did so well, they said, would you do a sequel? So I did a sequel called The Good Night's Sleep, which is what we're going to hear a little bit about tonight. There's also, and by the way, you have this book waiting for you when you walk out the door, so please grab one. It's a real nice 4-color book, which I would think go for about $20, and it's actually a lot less, so you get a pretty good deal there. I've also written a couple of articles, and I think Dana will have these available in case you want to download these as well or have them for your colleagues. But there's a real problem right now in our culture about the lack of sleep and this thing called digital toxicity and how we're supposed to be on all the time. So, stress is the new normal. Just FYI, this is not going to go away. It's going to be here. And the question is, how can we best cope with it? How can we best deal with it? And what I typically say is we have stress going to work. We have stress at work. We have stress going home from work. Even in the summertime, we have stress going home from work. I saw this great cartoon where this guy's in like a George Jetson spaceship going to work. He's got a glass top, and on top is a coffee mug. And the caption of the cartoon was, new technology, same mentality. Well, even when we get home, we got stress, and our kids have got stress. Stress is called the equal opportunity destroyer. It doesn't make a difference how much money you make, where you live, what you do for a living, how much you make, or put your tongue to your cheeks for a second, how dysfunctional your parents were when you were growing up. We all have stress. And when I say that we all have stress, I mean that we all have stress. Do you know, I didn't believe in reincarnation until I saw this picture. I gave a talk to a bunch of school teachers in the state of Colorado a couple of years ago, and this one guy who brought me in said, I want to speak to you about that picture you put in your slideshow. And I thought, oh my God, I never should have put this one in there. And I said, I'm really sorry if it offended you. And he goes, I want to find out how the hell you got a photograph of my daughter. I've heard that 4 times since then. And then I gave a talk at Quaker Oats, and this woman said, I love this presentation, but you're missing the last slide, this crescendo of stress. And I said, there's more? And she goes, oh, honey, you have no idea. She goes, I'll email you a JPEG. The next day I get this in the mail that says, even the animal kingdom is stressed. So stress is the new normal. It is definitely here to stay. The question is, how can we deal with it? And stress, not all stress is bad. Some stress actually is good. It helps motivate us. The question is, we're so far beyond that point. How can we pull the reins back and have some control in our lives? So stress goes by a lot of different definitions, one of which is that stress is a perception. I'm going to give you a little stress test. I think you'll all pass. But the question is, what do you see? And you can have two people in the same scenario. One person is freaking out and one person is like exhilarated. So the question is, what do you see? Who sees the woman with the old woman? Raise your hand. Hey, who sees the young woman? Raise your hand. Now the real question, who sees no women? Okay, so young woman, she has her face turned away from us. That's her eyelash, her nose, her chin, her ear, and she's wearing a necklace. You see that? The elderly woman, big honker of a nose, her eye, and thin lips. So we have an expression in stress management that says this: every situation has a good side and a bad side. Each moment, you decide. And this is the empowerment of resiliency. So, same situation, different interpretation. And when you find yourself getting stressed, how can we turn things around so we don't give our power away? If you may have seen this picture, the original caption was, this guy says, "I told my twin brother he was adopted." So, the question is, how can we stay in balance? And the answer is manyfold. We can definitely stay in balance. You may not be in the driver's seat, and if you are all the time, I want to see you, because that's called being delusional. But you can still stay balanced even if you're not in control of everything. And that's why I love this picture. This guy has not fallen off the bike. Would you agree? Yet he's also not in the driver's seat. So I want to imprint this picture into your mind so you can realize that even though you're not in control of everything, you can still stay centered. That is another way of describing resiliency. So what are some definitions of stress? How much time do you have? This topic is embraced by psychology, physiology, anthropology, sociology, theology, and probably a few more I haven't mentioned, and everyone has their own definitions. Some people in physiology say that stress is wear and tear in the body. And they're right, it is. All you got to do is think about the idea of a tension headache. Some people in the field of psychology say that stress is the inability to cope with problems. Also very true. Other people in the field of psychology says that stress is the loss of emotional control. All you got to do is think about road rage and think, yep, that one works. And then, of course, I like this one. This is actually kind of a Boulder definition. Put your tongues in your cheeks, I know. I was told no New Age jokes, but anyway, here goes. Stress is the absence of inner peace. You cannot be stressed and be relaxed at the same time. It's virtually impossible. But if you were to get a bunch of people together in a room like this and say no one is leaving until we come to a consensus on what stress is, you'll probably hear them say this: stress is a perceived threat, and the word perceived is in air quotes. And then we say in parentheses, real or imagined, because we can all make mountains out of molehills. I love the quote from Mark Twain who says, "I'm an old man now, and I've known a great many problems in my life, most of which never happened." So stress is a perceived threat, real or imagined, to our mind, body, spirit, or emotions. How about this definition? Stress is any change you encounter in your life. This is actually one of the new definitions, and we're in times of tremendous change. In fact, change and stress are often used synonymously to mean the same thing. And by and large, people don't like change, especially change they can't control. How many times have you gone to your favorite restaurant? And Lord knows we've got some great ones in town here. You walk in thinking, I know what I'm going to get, but I'll look at the menu anyway. You look at the menu like, oh my God, they changed the menu. How come they did this without asking me? So, people don't like change. There's a wonderful expression that says the only people who like change are wet babies. The rest of us don't like change. So, I like this definition that says tension is who you think you should be, relaxation is who you are. Isn't that nice? So let's talk about resiliency. This is the hot topic of the day. In fact, I'm leaving here to go to work with the U.S. Air Force out in Maryland today, because the Air Force has got a problem with suicides and all the problems you can imagine in the military. And so this is the topic they're asking me to speak about tonight. So the topic of resiliency, this is the typical picture. If you were to Google images for resiliency, this is what you typically see. Something growing out of the dead, something arising from the ashes, if you will. So I thought I'd give you a few definitions. This one says that resiliency is the power or ability to return to the original form, position, etc. after being bent, compressed, stretched, to be elastic. Basically, people talk about the idea of coming back up. But we got one more definition: the ability to recover readily from illness, depression, adversity, or the like, buoyancy. And people talk about resiliency as the ability to bounce back up after being knocked down in a crisis. That's really what it comes down to. And we're being challenged right now. This change I talked about is a challenge, almost like the winds of change knocking us down. and we got to get back up again. That's the answer. And to do it gracefully, not with a grudge, not angrily, but to do it gracefully and then move on with our lives. So a couple of books I thought I'd share with you. I'm a real big fan of reading books. I spent half my life at the Boulder bookstore or the library here. Two books that you may come across. One's called Resilience by Andrew Zolli, and then this one here. This guy actually studied people who've been through hell and back. And this is a collection of stories plus what made them great, and one of which I think he's got in here is Aaron Ralston. Remember Aaron Ralston? Who in the state, I think maybe it was Utah, lost an arm, rock climbing. So a little take-home message, because a lot of times you walk into a presentation, you walk out thinking, what did he say? So real simple. The art of resiliency, the formula is 3 bones. We've got a backbone, a wishbone, and a funny bone. If you can put these together, you're doing good. The problem is some people only use one, and then they end up getting knocked back down again. So the backbone consists of things like courage, stamina, persistence. You already know all this. This is all review. In terms of the wishbone, things like faith, vision, imagination. And there's a lot more, but we only have time for a short amount right now. And then last but not least, every expert says in resiliency, you got to be able to laugh. You can't take yourself too seriously. And that's where the funny bone comes in. Things like self-deprecation without losing your self-esteem, the ability to have comic relief, and just perspective on the bigger picture. How many times have you said to yourself, a year from now, this will be funny, but right now it's not funny? Okay, what you've done is you popped out of your ego and then slam back in again and say, no, I'm not going to wait a whole year. I want to be, this right now. So the real message is, how can we put all 3 of these together to have a sense of triumph of the human spirit? This is possible, and we have great examples of this all the time. One thing I like about the technology and about things like Facebook and YouTube is you see some amazing things you wouldn't see otherwise. People who've been through adversity come through, and they give you some sense of hope that you're going to make it yourself. And so that's what resiliency is all about. But that's only part of why I'm here today. This is the hot topic of the decade. And it's been around for a while. It's going to get worse before it gets better. But I thought I'd just share with you this. And this is actually a huge mixed message, because you just got a little talk about an app. So repeat after me these words: healthy boundaries. Healthy boundaries. Okay, technology is not bad. I get people say, he hates technology. I don't. I love my Apple computer. I have an iPad. I got all kinds of stuff. But I don't take it to bed with me. Healthy boundaries is the message that I want to get across here. If you got that down, nothing else, we have accomplished a great deal and the world's a better place. So, but there's a real problem with this, and I thought I'd just share with you some things, which again, you probably already have heard about, but to paint a picture that we can all grasp. We live in a culture of distractions. There's no doubt about this. And things are coming at us at a fast and furious pace to the point where when you're distracted, you can't make proper decisions. You can't think clearly. We live in a plugged-in society. Isn't this an amazing graphic? This basically says it all. There's a really good book, and the guy who actually wrote it came to speak here at the Boulder bookstore. It's called Last Child in the Woods. And he talks, it's by Richard Louv. He talks about kids who don't go outside to play. And one of the most phenomenal quotes in that book that really struck me in the heart was when a 9-year-old said, well, why would I want to go outside and play? There's no outlets out there. That speaks to the nature of where we live right now. And again, Boulder's a little different. We live in a bubble, but the bubble is being encroached upon. So, we live in a communication tsunami too. Things are coming at us left and right. Do you remember when the means of communication was basically a telephone or a letter or face-to-face? Now we've got a gazillion ways to communicate, and people have preferences, and there's also generational preferences where people under the age of 30 don't even email anymore. To them, that's passé. Everything's texting. People over the age of 50, it's like, call me. I want to talk to a real person. So we have this coming at us, and not just one tsunami, it's on a daily basis tsunami. Newsweek, before they went out of print, came out with an article called Brain Freeze. And it was all about the idea that when you've got too many distractions, too much information coming at you, sensory bombardment, you end up with mental paralysis. You can't make decisions clearly, and as a result, there's a lot of room for error there. And so this is the new buzzword, is mental paralysis. Maybe you've experienced this. So the term was digital burnout, but now we see digital toxicity. And again, it's the computers, the technology is not bad, it's how we use it. And right now, it's being overused to the nth degree, where we have a bombardment of sensory stimulation, and we have some real problems in terms of mental well-being, which ultimately is a part of physical or overall well-being. Okay, think back to Psych 101. Or maybe you're in high school. Remember the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's been updated. But just so you know, it's been updated again. This is an ad I saw in a magazine. I fly a lot around the country. It says, downtime is a new uptime. This is a message from the culture saying, don't relax. Not a good idea. You were not designed to be on 24/7. Because ultimately, the body becomes a battlefield for the war games of the mind. If you're always on, and when I say on, I mean whether it's technology, you're in a state of arousal. This is called stress. If you're always in a state of stress, something is going to be problematic with some organ in your body. The body becomes a battlefield for the war games of the mind. And if you're under the age of 30, which we got a pretty young crowd here, I'm impressed, you probably can't relate to this. But if you're over the age of 30, you're very much well aware what the hell is going on because things don't work as good as they did before age 30, right? I think we can all, actually, some people who are between 20 and 30 know what I'm talking about too. Stress and disease has a huge connection. Everything between the common cold to cancer. Everything from herpes to hemorrhoids. By the way, do you ever wonder why they're called hemorrhoids and not asteroids? It's a lunch hour. I'm trying my best to keep you awake, okay? I know someone's going to tell that joke tonight. I can just see it now. But just so you know, the media, the culture is saying, stay plugged in, don't turn off, always be on. And you can't do this without serious repercussions for your physical health. So we live in the age of technology, and we see now there's a term for this called screen addictions. And again, technology is not bad, it's how it's used or we give our power away to it. It's supposed to serve us, not that we are slaves to it. I thought this cartoon was great, wasn't it? And then I just saw this the other day. We now see people dying playing Pokemon. Who knew? This is actually probably for real now. I love this, just saying. And this is a video that came out on YouTube about the problems with internet addiction over in China. And it says that they've got a serious problem. And here, to give you an example of how serious this is, and it's not just in China, it's all over the world, and hopefully not in Boulder, because you think we're a little savvy, we can actually make this not happen. But kids, and when I say kids, I don't mean like 2-year-olds, I'm talking like 9 to 18, now wear diapers so they can pee and poo and not miss part of their video games. This is part of the screen addiction process, which this guy calls electric heroin. And it makes headline news. There's a new concept called FOMA, the fear of missing out. And this is what people are so obsessed about staying in touch that they don't unplug. And they're missing sleep. If nothing else you get out of this talk, that's a big problem. We have over half of the country's population not getting a good night's sleep on a regular basis. This is dangerous. So, by the way, I took these pictures. I took this one here when I was in Copper Mountain because I got a ski pass for Copper Winter Park. Anybody else downhill skiing? Okay, you know, it takes Copper at least. It takes if you do it right, you can take like about a half an hour coming down. I did 4 runs. That's 2 hours. This guy hadn't moved. My first thought was he's freezing his ass off. My second thought is this is no way to spend a vacation. And then you should know this is what it's all about. There's a huge aspect of narcissism with selfies. But when you see this next headline, I want you to know it's a problem. More people are dying from selfies than shark attacks. So there's a seduction to the technology. And all I'm going to ask you to do is just think, every time you turn your computer on, your smartphone, whatever, just ask yourself, am I honoring a healthy boundary or am I being sucked in through the seduction of technology? Okay? If you can ask yourself that, you're now making a choice, and choices are empowering, which adds to resiliency. So how about this? UK kids spend less time outside than prison inmates. That is not a good headline. Now we also have a concept called digital dementia, where basically you give your power away to the technology. And again, I love having GPS. I've got places where it would take me a lot less time than going on my own. But if you give your power away, pretty soon you're basically outsourcing your memory. And this is problematic. So a couple of examples. This one's pretty humorous. Mom, where are you? Leaving Walmart. Halfway home. Why, sweetie? You brought me to Walmart with you. Oh, darn, I'll be there in a bit. I'm just the messenger. But it gets more serious when we have something like this. there was a train wreck in Madrid, and the reason was because the person running the train was texting and not paying attention to where it was going. And then a month later, we had this, and people died. And although the results of the one in Pennsylvania last year aren't in, I suspect, how could you be going 110 in a 40-mile-an-hour zone and not be aware of that? That guy was distracted. Whether he was on a cell phone or something else, he was definitely distracted. And how about this? This is actually a couple in South Korea who were so obsessed with video games, their baby starved when it was brought home from the hospital. And there's a whole HBO video about this, a movie about this. So we've outsourced our memory to technology. You know how people think about the word outsourcing. Sometimes the dander gets up a little bit. It's not bad if it's a sense of empowerment. It is bad if you give your power away. People who have resiliency reclaim their personal sovereignty. Does that make sense? Do you follow that? So a really good book by Sherry Turkle is called Alone Together. She talks about the real problems. At MIT, she thought that technology was going to solve all the problems. And then she began to look and see how people behave with the technology and said, we've got problems in River City. And she wrote this book saying there's a huge amount of alienation and isolation with people who are away with their technology and not actually looking people in the eye when they talk to them anymore. Has a new book about reclaiming conversation in case you're interested. If you ever get a chance to hear her, or if you want, download an iPod podcast from Terry Gross's Fresh Air. Great interview. This book here, Terms of Service, talks about all the people under the age of I think 25 or 30 or so that basically are zombies now with the real world because they're doing this the whole time. And I came across this article. I thought it would be fascinating to share with you some of the information. It's called, Is Your Smartphone Making You Dumb? And the research looks something like this. This guy, Ron Friedman, actually, he's not the researcher, he's like the reporter, but he showed a couple different studies. The first one says people given a task with a cell phone did 20% worse than those with no cell phones present. They were each given a desk, and some were told you can put your cell phone on the desk, just turn it off, or don't use it, and the other one's no cell phone. The same task, I don't know what it was, maybe a math problem, something, but the ones who had the cell phone present but didn't use it thought it might go off, and so their attention was distracted on a regular basis, and they did 20% worse. The same experiment was done with the conversations. Talk to somebody with a cell phone present, talk to somebody without one. These were the fascinating people, except the research showed the ones with cell phones thought they were boring because they were waiting for this to go off or text message or something. So I think that's what this study here says. People asked to participate in face-to-face conversations found the person they talked to much less interesting when a smartphone was present. Their minds were elsewhere, anticipating a call or a text message. Again, you cannot have your mind distracted. Remember growing up, you heard your school teacher say, I want your undivided attention. Remember that? That's not happening today. So here's what I thought was pretty interesting. For memory formation, in case you wonder why you can't get to the same place after you've had the GPS already take you there, they now know this. In addition to splitting your attention, there is a strong reason to suspect that frequent smartphone use and the constant connectivity engenders interferes with the memory function. And here's why. To transfer information from short-term memory to long-term memory, the brain requires periods of rest, relaxation. In a world where every free moment is spent refreshing emails, texting, or posting on social media, there are few opportunities for long-term memories to form. Basically, we're grazing, hopping, ricocheting from information bank and forth, and you need to have periods of rest before things to be locked into long-term memory. Does that make sense? So I got a chance, I was a keynote presenter at a conference on brain health, and this is actually a woman named Jill Bolte-Taylor. She wrote a book called My Stroke of Insight. She is the #2 most popular TED Talk of all the TED Talks. And she talked about her stroke. She actually had a stroke, but she's a brain physiologist, so she actually was able to observe herself having a stroke because luckily it was the left hemisphere that had a stroke, the right hemisphere was global, could see what was going on. She said that her mother basically took care of her when she was out of the hospital, and when friends would come to see her, her mother said, you've got 30 seconds. Someone would drive like 2 hours, you got 30 seconds. And the mother knew at some level there had to be time for rest and relaxation to process the information, the sensory information. And what Jill calls this is this cerebral plateau. I call it relaxation, but we all need to have times to unplug and to calm down, to have that sense of inner peace. And most people today don't have this. Most people are plugged in, tuned in all the time, and your body's physiology cannot operate that way. Does that make sense? Again, technology is not bad. It's how we use it that can be problematic. So, cell phone distraction splits our attention. Okay, the real obvious message there. This I found kind of interesting. There's now a term called digital depression. And I find that the term's interesting because it seems like every new day we have a new term, how digital has impacted our lives, and not always in a good way. So he has some suggestions. Keep your smartphones off your desk. Keep them out of the way so you don't get distracted. Number 2, turn off the alerts. Have you ever had a dinner at a restaurant or with somebody and then all of a sudden it beeps, the light comes on, there's a noise? That's an alert. And it seems like now everything is an emergency. Remember the days when cell phones first came out? Oh, just have it for emergencies. Now it's like everything's an emergency. Life's not that bad. You can live without this for a while. You've done it before. And so the question is healthy boundaries. Repeat after me. Healthy boundaries. Good, thank you. Okay, next one, schedule distraction-free times. This is also code for relaxation, stress management, times where you're unplugged. Follow the message from Eric Clapton, unplugged. That joke went over half the people's heads. Okay. One more thing before we kind of get into a few more things here. This is actually an article that came out based in an NPR story. They want to see how good memory retention is for students who take notes longhand with pen and paper or they use computers. And this is what they found. 50 students attended a college lecture. Half took notes on laptops and half with pen and paper. Afterward, both groups were given a comprehension test. The students who used paper scored significantly higher than those who used laptops. This Mueller's, the researcher, attributes this unexpected finding, published in the journal Psychology Science, to the fact that the analog note-taking, who knew that's what it was called, but that's what it's called, were forced to synthesize the information rather than merely transcribe it. So she calls it desirable difficulty, that when you take the time to process it the old-fashioned way, it retains longer in your memory. Does that make sense? Again, technology is not bad, it's just how we use it. So there's an addiction. I just thought I'd show you. There's all kinds of surveys now about addiction with technology. I won't read these here. You get the idea. But my thought is this. If the last thing you do is check your smartphone before you go to bed, and the first thing you do when you wake up is check your smartphone, you might have an addiction going on there. How about this research? People check their emails up to 37 times an hour. This is dated, by the way. It's probably more than that now. A Harris poll suggests that more than 50 emails a day is called email stress. I get that more before I wake up in the morning, that many emails. On average, 250 email messages are sent a day by people. We're being flooded with information like this. And again, the tsunami comes at us time and time again. This is the idea that receipt of smartphone pings or illuminations, the alerts, release dopamine. If you want to know where the real aspect of addiction comes in, it's not just an ego-based thing, it's actually a physiological-based thing. Dopamine is the hormone in your brain that is associated with addiction. It's the feel-good hormone. And when people have their cell phones go off, it's like, oh wow, someone out there needs me. Oh wow. And it turns out that this need to feel needed is an addiction. Does that make sense? I think we've all been there. We all know what this is like. And even if your phone doesn't go off, but you think it does, you get that squirt of dopamine. Now, I don't have a cell phone. True confessions here. Not yet, anyway. It turns out that I travel a lot. When I go to DIA, I'm at gate whatever, the United Terminal, and someone's phone goes off, it's a riot just to observe humanity. Because when one phone goes off, or you know the little jingle from the Apple iPad, 20 people reach down to try and find it, as if it's theirs. And it's that, that rush of dopamine. How about this research? Susan Greenfield, who's a researcher out in England, professor of synaptic pharmacology at Oxford University, cites concerns regarding 6 to 8 hours per day of computer interface and its effect on neural connectivity. You may have heard the term called neuroplasticity, and if you haven't, today I want you to know what this is. It's how your brain gets wired. And we are wiring our brains for stress, to be on all the time. Meditation, mindfulness, you may have heard those words before. Hopefully you have. God, it's Boulder. You probably know them already. This is how you wire your brain for relaxation. You can have both and do well with both, but you've got to take both together. You can't just do one. This I thought was pretty scary here. By the way, I took this picture when I was taking a cab ride in Florence, and this guy was driving and using the cell phone. I'm like, I'm going to die, I'm going to die. So I'm trying to talk to him, see if he can engage in my conversation. Now he's doing three things: driving, cell phone, and talking to me. Researchers at the University of Utah found that people who talk on their cell phones or texting while driving show a driving impairment rate similar to being drunk. We now know this to be true. So, again, you can't have your attention divided and do things. Multitasking is a myth. Yeah, people text while driving too, yeah. We also have a whole new term, and by the way, just looking around, no one fits in this category here, but there's a whole new term called digital obesity. They say smoking is the new sitting. People who basically sit all day, and because when they're not working, they're still doing this. The whole idea of Pokemon was to actually get kids off their butt outside. Pokemon Go, I guess. So how about this? I thought it was kind of interesting. More than half of American employees don't leave their office during lunch. Sitting all day long. And what they typically say is, again, sitting is the new smoking of the 21st century. Used to call this sedentary lifestyle. It's all a new way of reframing it. So we have a dangerous affair with cell phones. By the way, if you ever see a guy with duct tape to his head with a cell phone, run in the opposite direction, okay? This is not good. A wonderful book came out, Cross Currents, by Robert Becker. Robert Becker actually is a physician. He died a couple of years ago. I got a chance to meet him while he was here at a conference in town here. And he was responsible for trying to understand the connection between power lines and cancer, because a lot of people were coming down with cancer who live near power lines. You probably heard about this. And I don't want to get into physics, it would take a long time, but the idea really comes down to the fact that there's quantum physics involved. There's a concept called entrainment, and if you have two objects in proximity, the object of lesser vibration will try and match the one of higher vibration. To me, that was nowhere near as illuminating or disturbing as this one fact he has in the book. 69% of women who are pregnant, who sleep with an electric blanket, miscarry. It distorts your human electromagnetic field, is what it comes down to. So there's another woman that came out with a book called Disconnect. Her name is Deborah Davis. She's actually a researcher out, I think it's at the University of Pennsylvania. And if you're looking for a real good book about some of the problems with cell phones and smartphones, I direct your attention here. Again, I'm going to tell you that it's not bad, it's how it's used. But when you're using this all the time, you're changing your cellular physiology out of homeostasis into distress. That's what it comes down to. And by the way, if you ever take a look at the instructions for cell phones, it says hold it 4 to 6 inches from your head. Do you know anybody that does that? Yeah. So here comes the problem with sleep, and there's a huge problem going on right now. It's called the invasion of technology in the bedroom. There should be only one thing in your bedroom, and that is a bed. You should only do one thing in your bedroom, and that is sleep. Okay, maybe two things. But televisions, computers, smartphones, iPads do not belong in the bedroom. And the reason why is because we are now seeing a whole sleep-deprived nation. So what happens is this now begins to affect your ability to make melatonin. If you end up on Jeopardy, here's the answer. What hormone is known as a sleep hormone? The answer is, what is melatonin? Melatonin actually kicks in when the light begins to diminish naturally, when the temperatures begin to go down, because now you need to sleep. But when you have artificial light coming in, it throws off your circadian rhythms, your body's clock. That's not something new age, that's scientifically proven. Circadian rhythms, your body operates on a 24-hour clock. And if you have artificial light coming in, it throws off your body clock. Now, when you had a lamp over your head reading in bed, that's artificial light. But now we've got the light coming directly into the eyes. Do you see a difference there? And this is throwing off your pineal gland's ability to make melatonin. And this throws off your body's physiology, and when your sleep is compromised, your immune system's compromised, and when that's compromised, we have all hell breaking loose. So the pineal gland, very, very important. This is actually, again, something that you should be aware of. This is what sets your body's clock, your body's circadian rhythms. And it's being thrown off by technology in the after hours. But it's worse than that, because we now know that the Wi-Fi router puts out a vibration that negates the pineal gland to make melatonin too. So I have one suggestion. If you get nothing else out of this talk, I know there's about 40 things I've already mentioned like this, but the one thing is now, turn off your Wi-Fi router when you go to bed. You don't need it. Turn it off, because if you're not, it's affecting your quality of sleep. So the effect of screen light melatonin is profound these days. But there's also one more reason why we shouldn't be using cell phones perhaps as alarm clocks. I would go back to the analog alarm clock if I were you. I won't get into this, but people say, what about taking melatonin? Whenever you take something out of your body and put it into your body that's not natural, you throw off the chemistry. Okay? I'm not a physician, but I'll tell you right now that the natural way to go is the natural way to go, first and foremost. If you've got serious problems, then I would ask your physician. Every third person in town is an acupuncturist, so you should be in really good stead here. But acupuncture is a great way to try and regulate your body back in case you're out of it. So now comes mindfulness. And mindfulness is a buzzword. It's been around for millennia. It just happened to hit big with a guy named Thich Nhat Hanh who came to the United States, and then Jon Kabat-Zinn who did some research at the University of Massachusetts. But what this really comes down to is that we need to have time to unplug and live in the present moment. That's what it comes doing to. How do we do it for time? How about? Pardon me? 12:43. Oh, okay, time. So a little bit about mindfulness here. It got started with a raisin. If you ever go to a Jon Kabat-Zinn workshop, he has you hold a raisin, and you look at the raisin. You smell the raisin. You might even listen to the raisin. You think to yourself, when are we going to eat this damn thing? But that doesn't happen for a while, because you are living in the present moment with the raisin. Okay? If you don't like raisins, try chocolate. This whole message of mindfulness is to live in the present moment. Most people today are either living in the past with something that's happened before, and they feel guilty about it or angry about it, or something in the future, they're obsessed about what could happen and they're afraid about it, anxiety. The two stress emotions, in a nutshell, anger and fear. Anger is a fight response, fear is a flight response. In a nutshell, those are the two stress emotions. When you're experiencing those, you're not in the present moment. And mindfulness says, come back to the present moment. So there's all kinds of research now about this. You heard a little bit about the app that you can download, but there's all kinds of research now about mindfulness meditation. Some of the amazing stuff is out at the University of Wisconsin-Madison about how your brain gets rewired when you begin to basically just calm down and focus on your breathing. Okay? You don't have to actually recite Sanskrit or shave your head or go sell flowers at DIA. That is so 20th century, by the way. That was my best line. Okay. So what is mindfulness? Mindfulness is being in the present moment. They call it present-centeredness. It's also what we say, live in the present moment. It's also where you detach from your emotions. This is the key, because a lot of times when you take mindfulness classes, they forget this part. So it's not just where you sit at a riverbank and you watch your thoughts flow down the river. That's not mindfulness. Mindfulness is where you step back and watch yourself watching your thoughts on the riverbank. And when you watch your thoughts, you don't say, oh, there goes my ex-spouse. What a witch. Because there's no judgment. You just say, there she goes. Okay? Detached observation. And this is really hard because what you're basically doing is what is known in the Eastern culture as domesticating the ego. Where there is chronic stress, there is ego. I'm not going to mention any names, but the news is filled with them these days. If you don't domesticate the ego, you're going to have poop all over the place. And so having a time to unplug and sit still, focus on your breathing, is to be mindful. That you can navigate the course of your life and not be blown over by the winds of change. So, detached observation, where you see yourself doing this, is what it comes down to. So some people actually just do breathing. That's all they do, just focus on your breathing. And if you're focused on your breathing and a thought comes in about, oh my God, I have to get that report done by 5 o'clock, let that thought go and return back to your breathing. Every time some thought comes in, it's a distraction. Or if you hear a siren outside, that's a distraction. Or you think, oh my God, my parking meter is going to run out in 2 seconds. I just saw your t-shirt. Distraction. Think of one thing and one thing only. Body scans, some people actually look and see how their bodies are doing in terms of tension. The number one symptom of stress is muscle tension. Because of the neural innervations from your brain throughout your body, muscle tension is the number one symptom of stress. You're also in a great town because every third person in town is a massage therapist. There's no excuse for muscle tension in this town. Mindfulness yoga, and then last but not least, loving compassion. And this may sound like a new age thing. It's not. The shift we're trying to get in terms of consciousness so that we're not a bunch of cave people is moving from fear to love. And love is not Hollywood romance. Love is having a sense of patience. Love is having a sense of forgiveness, a sense of humor. Do you know, I went to go hear Norman Cousins, the godfather and grandfather of humor therapy, and he got up on stage about a month before he passed away, and he said, "I never said humor cured me." Kind of like yelled at the audience, like, I thought we came here for a fun time. He was a curmudgeon. And then he said, "I never even said humor healed me." People I think like, "I want my money back. Why'd I come tonight?" And then he said this, "It wasn't humor that healed me. It was love. Humor is just a metaphor for love." And so, laughter, patience, optimism, forgiveness, these are all acts of compassion that we need a lot more of in the world today because there's so little of it. And so I'd like to close right now by saying that there's a book waiting for you. You don't have to read it, but it's got a lot of pictures. It's fun to read. There's a couple of exercises. And the reason why I put exercises in there is because I live by the motto that goes like this: to know and not to do is not to know. I'll say it again. To know and not to do is not to know. You can know all the right things to do to live a healthy life, but if you don't do them, what good is it? How many times have you heard your parents say to you, or have you said as a parent, "What I'm saying to you is going in one ear and out the other"? We don't want that happening today. We want things to stay for a while, settle in there. And so I want you to actually, before we leave, think to yourself, how can you change one behavior, healthy boundaries, to pull the reins in and come back to balance? And if we've done that, then we've done our job today. Thank you very, very much. Thank you.